obsessed. I was obsessed. It was the only thing I thought about.
Committed.
No, obsessed. I was obsessed.
Right.
It was the only thing I thought about. It was the only thing I cared about for years. And it kind of showed me what it takes to get good at something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's choose that thing wisely. You know, make sure that thing that you're choosing to get good at is worth it.
Right.
Because that's a huge investment.
Right.
You know, and so that was and I'm proud. Again, mine was worth it. I'm proud of that. But it has to be an obsession if you want to make it to the next level of something. It just has to be.
Yeah, and I'm sure it made your job at the fire academy and being a fireman a lot easier.
I wouldn't say easier. Being in shape is better than not being in shape, you
Right.
know, in general. And I fared. I was really good, obviously, in like the running aspects and that, but there were certain strength aspects that I didn't quite have, and I had to build that. You know,
Right.
I had a pretty slight frame going into the fire academy, so I had to build up some muscle a little bit.
I just feel like listening to you now, I have no excuse. I have to. I said, how do you find the time? You basically, that's true. Any 10 minutes, any time you can sneak in.
Planning.
You're really gonna
It's
do
just planning, and you have a lot going on. Somebody told me once, you can only. There's only so many things you could be good at one time, right? And so, like, you obviously you have a job, you have wife and kids and everything. You have a lot of responsibilities, on top of which your passion is politics, right? So outside of your everyday responsibilities, that's where your time's going. That's where your mental energy is going. And so I get it. I get why somebody doesn't have as much time as I had, because that was the only other thing for me.
That was
and so I do stand by the fact that there's always 10 or 15 minutes to do something.
No, there is. I hit the gym the other day.
But again, when you're a busy guy, and when your passion is something like politics, when your passion is something, especially in your case where it's the goal is to help people, I can't frown too much down on somebody like yourself when my passion was completely selfish.
You're being easy.
And so
I do.
No, I'm serious. I think about this a lot. Like I spent a lot of time and energy doing something. And again, I'm proud of it, but doing something that was for me, right? You spend a lot of time and energy doing something that's for other people, and I have to respect that.
Sometimes. I mean, look, I'm sure there's an element of ego involved, and I'm sure
there's no ego in politics.
Of course
Stop
not.
it.
But I would like to get back involved, at least in running. I don't know about being a triathlete, but there is no excuse. And I really enjoyed running. I used to tell people, the
cheapest sport in the world.
It's the cheapest sport in the world, and the feeling, the sort of endorphins that are released, the kind of just kind of chemical feeling your body feels. I would tell people there's just nothing like that. The runner's high they talk about. I really experienced it a lot. Like I said, I ran cross country and mid distance in high school and college. It was such an amazing feeling, physically, and even a mental focus that you get after running. And to anybody out there that would like to take up running or be involved in being a triathlete, what would be your advice?
Find a group.
Okay.
That's the big one.
Okay.
It's a really hard thing to do, and it's impossible to do on your own. It's absolutely impossible. Like you could be really self-motivated, but it's complicated in terms of the physiology. And if you just find a group that can show you how to do it, where to go, the workouts you need to do, that's the 100% the best way to go about it. You can read all the magazines you want in the world, but there's only so many YouTube videos and everything that'll inspire you to get out the door. Sometimes you need people to hold you accountable and kind of keep your feet to the fire.
Okay.
That's the best group. Find your local running store, your local triathlon store. I'm positive they're going to have some sort of weekly runs. And if you could just start getting your foot in the door, the first step is the hardest.
Right. And in Bay Ridge, they have the Bay Ridge Runners. I've gone out with them a few times. Any other groups that you used to run with or still around?
Who's still around? Well, Dashing Whippets is a large running organization. North Brooklyn, there's a South Brooklyn Runners organization out there. They're all over. Just Google like New York City run groups, and you'll find a bunch. Like they're everywhere.
Right. So let's maybe wrap up. I just have a couple of questions for you. One of them was going to be any books you recommend, and you had said one. Are there any other books you might recommend out there, whether it's for running or life?
I don't have any good life. The life book is the Tribe book. I'm going to double down on Tribe.
Okay.
A good book out there.
Or any training manuals or things that someone should read or watch if they were going to get involved.
I'll tell you what. If you're looking to get into triathlon, check out a book called Without Limits. Is it Without Limits? I think I have it up there. It's not Without Limits. But it's a book by Chrissy Wellington.
Okay.
Chrissy Wellington was a out of nowhere star in the triathlon world. She has a really crazy story, and she wrote this really fantastic book that's all about triathlon. She was she was like living in Nepal and just kind of got into fitness and was living in elevation. She's from Great Britain. Came back to Great Britain, was working for some like GMO. Like she was like this like do-gooder, wanted to like fix the world, and ended up becoming a professional triathlete and became an Ironman world champion several times over. And then at the top of her game, gave up the sport to go back and help people again. You know, she's a really smart, intelligent, and inspiring woman who has great recommendations on how you're going to get into the sport. Has a great story herself, just in general, and just is an inspiring book. If you're out of shape and you want to get into shape, this is a good book to read.
Book for me.
Yeah, seriously,
Right.
It's a good book that'll kind of kick you in the butt a little bit and make you move.
Well, if you have it, maybe I'll borrow it.
I actually might. It might be up over there. If not, I'll check it out. But
Speaking of over here, not in Bay Ridge anymore, right?
I am.
Even though you've got the
Brooklyn,
ode to Brooklyn
I
on the wall.
I can't not, say, people. I live in Astoria, Queens now. But when people ask me where I'm from, I'm saying Brooklyn. That's it.
That's it.
I mean, we were talking about
the
this
secret
earlier.
is out now.
I end up. I mean, not that Astoria is super cheap, but it's. I got the apartment I'm in now. I got a much better deal on than I thought I could have in Bay Ridge, and this gets back into just the rising rent prices and everything.
Right.
Can I ask you a question?
Go right ahead. Uh-oh.
If you could fix one thing about New York City, or maybe about Bay Ridge in general, what would you go after? How would you help the salt of the earth people that we both know? What do you think is the single best thing you could do to help the people that we grew up with?
Good question. I think that, unfortunately, right now, I think the issue that's affecting a lot of people is sort of crime and safety, and I think that
Really?
I think with bail reform, I think that that's kind of a just a very current issue in the sense that I think we were very safe for so long, and unfortunately, I think the way that what's going on in Albany is kind of pushing bad legislation. So I don't know. I think that if that got under control, it could, we could lower crime and really take back the safe streets. But I don't want to say that because I don't think that's an overarching or long-term plan. Or long-term problem. I think it's temporary in the sense that, this stems from bad legislation up in Albany. And I think if you fix that, you're laughing. Okay.
I don't disagree.
Okay. Well, I just think that if you, I don't want to pontificate, but I think if you repeal the bail reform law, and I think you give some discretion back to judges, kind of support the police. So I think the answer is the policies right now are bad. I think the people that are in charge implementing those policies are not doing the right thing. So I think there's sort of a culture with law enforcement that's one of the primary reasons. There was almost an attempted rape in Bay Ridge the other night. So that issue is pressing. So I would try to address I would triage, right? If I had an opportunity to do anything, I would triage the problems. And the most pressing issue for the community right now, I think, is crime and safety. And I wouldn't have said that a while ago. I would have said things like illegal home conversions, affordable housing, and transportation. Those are long-term problems that we need real solutions for. I think in terms of illegal home conversions and affordable housing, that's something I'd really like to address. It's funny you say that. Just tonight, a neighbor of mine kind of has been putting stuff on Facebook about her next door neighbor. She lives in a brownstone on 6th Avenue. Her next door neighbor, which is an illegal conversion, that was a big issue I talked about in the city council, dug up the house, took 6 inches of her property. She doesn't have the money for a lawyer. That really gets me going. It really bothers me because it lends itself to a lot of things. It lends itself kind of to the destruction of a neighborhood. When you talk about the salt of the earth people, the people that, want to send their kids to school, want to have a clean environment, want to live in safe areas, it really bothers me. So the issue tonight was she put pictures on Facebook. The neighbors had two 18-wheelers worth of electronic supplies and boxes, stuffing it in. Now, she put this picture up yesterday. It was one 18-wheeler, and there were pallets and pallets along 6th Avenue. Pallets, as if there was a warehouse. And this is a single family, maybe 2-family home where you're just packing stuff in. And clearly this is for whatever kind of commercial purposes they're going to repackage this to sell it. It's completely inappropriate. And you may be able to speak to this as a fireman. I remember talking to my friend Keith, who's a fireman in the academy, and he would say, what do you need for a fire? I said, I don't know. He'd say, you need fuel. And one of the things that makes fire, and you can confirm this, hot and heavy, is the amount of fuel, the amount of stuff that can burn. And that plastic and the boxes, it just seems like a nightmare. It is a fire hazard. So I would try to take on those housing issues, and I would address that. I think that's important. To provide sort of relief, and I think it has an effect, right? The schools get overcrowded because when you pack people and things into areas that are not built for it, the schools can't catch up and build fast enough. And so I would like to take that on, but I think you have to kind of build affordable housing as well. So I'd like to look at some of the undeveloped areas, let's say by the train tracks, like along 65th Street. They had talked about building up sort of studio type of apartments for people that are maybe more transient, that are looking for a smaller housing, which is what the people that are creating illegal conversions, what they're really doing is they're taking single family homes and turning them into 10-room apartments. And the neighborhood
also
is not,
a fire hazard.
Also a fire hazard, right? And you had some firefighters die. I think it was uptown Manhattan many years ago because we're in the Bronx, and they had stepped into one of these areas what they weren't expecting.
Yeah.
So you talked about this, and again, I know from some of my friends, when you train as a firefighter to go into a certain building, you study the type of building types. You talked about that in Chelsea. You have to know the buildings in your community, wherever your firehouse is, so you kind of know how to approach it, what the layout is. And when the layout is not what you expect, that puts firefighters' lives at risk. But just as important are the neighbors. Now, these are attached homes, right? So this is the woman who kind of told the whole world about it. She put the pictures up, got my attention. She's got a 94-year-old father who lives upstairs. So even in a fire, under normal circumstances, if something were to catch, it'd be hard for him to get down and get out in time. But what really enraged her and upset her was all of the pallets and the trucks and all of this kind of commercial level activity in Bay Ridge would have made it almost impossible for an ambulance or fire trucks to get in. So it was a hazard on top of hazard. So that was a big issue for me. And I think, look, I'd love world peace. I'd love to improve the economy. There's a lot of things I'd want to do as if I had my way. But I think you have to kind of focus on the things you can really make a difference in. I think that's one of them. And the second thing, like I said, is transportation. I think that we really have to revolutionize and reinvent transportation. One of the things I do like and agree with is sort of a ferry network. I think ferries are nice. The problem is with ferries that there's such a cost involved in ferry service. So if there aren't enough people riding it, eventually the subsidies will run out. And
are people riding the Bay Ridge ferry?
Say it again.
Are people riding the Bay Ridge ferry?
Not to the degree that I think, and I'm certainly sure that the EDC and some of the other agencies in the city, the statistics will show that not at the level that they need to be self-sufficient. See, I don't think they can ever really be self-sufficient in terms of charging a $2, $3, even $5 fee. But if you can get ridership up to a certain level, you can kind of justify that expense a little bit more. And what does that come down to, in my opinion? It's really advertising, right? It's convincing people to get down there and try it. It's kind of getting people to change their habits. And you really do that by, oddly enough, promotion. You promote ferry service and other alternative methods. I think you have to think creatively. One of the things I think you could do is what I talked about in my city council campaign is maybe get a sort of a jitney or a bus. You look at like Dyker Heights or places like Bath Beach or Bensonhurst, places in South Brooklyn that are even further away from the R train or from the subway. You maybe have a van or a bus service that picks people up in the morning and takes them down to the ferry. So a 5-minute ride on the bus or 10-minute ride on the bus, and then a 20-minute ride to downtown Manhattan or midtown Manhattan. And I think, and all kinds of forms of transportation. And I think bikes are going to be a part of that. And I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I do. I think one thing that is good, I will say this, people will be surprised for me to hear me say this, but I think we should have more people on bikes. And if you can get out of cars and get on a bike, I think that's great. I think we want to see people on bicycles, transporting themselves, getting from place to place when they can. The problem with the bike lanes, in my opinion, is that not many people take their bike from Bay Ridge to 42nd Street Midtown, or to Harlem, or wherever they have to go throughout the city. Or for example, for me, I work in Woodside, Queens. I don't ride my bike, to Woodside, Queens. In fact, public transportation would take me 2 or 3 hours. So I drive. So the idea that we're going to push everyone onto bikes is not realistic. And I would like to see more of a balance. So I think, it's not even a matter of building less bike lanes. I would build more bike lanes or more areas where bicycles could ride, but sort of put them off where we don't take away from the traffic. So like the Shore Road bike path, or maybe a bike path along Sunset Park along in the industrial area. So we find channels.
I heard rumors that was happening.
I heard rumors too. I'd like to see something like that. What I don't like to see is, for example, you got me started on a tangent, but like 7th Avenue in Bay Ridge, what they've done now is they have a protected bike lane, which means they've taken out a lane of traffic in a very dangerous area.
Yeah.
You've got exits off of the BQE, entrances onto the BQE, kind of known truck routes, and I don't think bicycle traffic should be there. So what they did is they put a protective thing, a barrier. The problem there is now what happens between November and March, or when it snows. Less people ride bikes, and now you've taken out a lane of traffic. And all vehicle transportation is not bad. And I think that the advocates for bike riders, they're passionate. And one of the reasons is, there are a lot of people on bikes getting hit. My son was in a bike accident. Drivers drive like crazy. I get it. But they've sort of demonized all vehicle traffic, and I think that's the problem. Fire trucks are vehicles, ambulances are vehicles, sanitation vehicles are vehicles, school buses, you name it. So I'd like to work on transportation. I've got a lot of different ideas. So transportation would be something.
I think and like the bike lane issue, there's blame to kind of go all around. I think I've seen cyclists not do the right thing. I've seen motorists not do the right thing. Everyone just has to understand that we coexist in this environment.
That's right. That's a great point. I don't think we talk enough. We talk at each other. Maybe I'm on the sort of the anti-bike lane side, and then there's people that are pro-bike, and we talk at each other as if we're on different sides. But really, we should come together. And unfortunately, you talk about social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook, you don't get to really have a conversation anymore. And hopefully, things like this, a podcast, and we can interview people and talk to people from, different sides of the issue and maybe get a little bit more perspective. But I agree with you, we've got to coexist and live together. Bikes, cars, peoples, buses, trains,
Yeah.
And hovercraft, and who knows, maybe we're going to be flying with drones, right? You'd be surprised that maybe, air traffic.
Did you ever hear Neil deGrasse Tyson? Somebody said, when are we going to have flying cars? He says, we have flying cars. They're called helicopters.
Right. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for doing this.
All right, cool. All right.
Thanks for having me.
Any recommendations for where I can go out here in Astoria and get a good bite to eat?
There's so many. Mm-hmm. You like Greek?
I love Greek.
Greek place right on the corner over here.
Okay, cool.
It's fantastic.
All right,
There's a burger place right over there.
Nice. Well, shish kebab.
Yeah, whatever strikes your fancy. We have a lot of options.
Sounds good. All right, thank you guys. Thanks for listening. And this is the first of what I hope to be many interviews with some of the people in my life. And if you can make any recommendations, we talked about 6 degrees. If there's anybody out there that you think I should interview, or you'd like to see interviewed, please say that in the comment section down here. Like, and most importantly, subscribe. And why don't you plug your channel and your podcast one more time?
I have a YouTube channel, the Personal Record YouTube channel, and it's called the Personal Record Podcast, which is all about running and triathlon. I get to interview a lot of my friends and ask them questions I wouldn't get to I've asked them otherwise. So if it's a fun show. Check it out.
Yeah. And if anyone has any comments, they can comment there on the podcast or on the channel and make recommendations to people that
You
you'd like
can
to hear.
email me at tim@personalrecordpodcast.com.
Cool. All right, man.
Buy some t-shirts.
You got it. Thanks. All right. Bye, guys.